All right. Welcome back to All Cars React, y'all. It is time for a new reaction to a Motorweek retro review. This week it is the 1999 Isuzu VehiCROSS. Now, I don't even know if anybody else is going to remember this vehicle, and I don't know what I'm going to say. Honestly, this is one of the ones I don't have a lot of preconceived notions about what I want to say about it. I don't remember it being on the market very long. I don't remember it selling in any kind of real numbers, and I remember it being hideous. So it's you and me sitting down to have a nice little conversation. Find that comfy chair, relax, grab yourself a beverage of choice. It's pretty early here in the morning, so that is just the last dregs of my morning coffee. And let's see what Motorweek said, wow, 26 years ago, about an Isuzu sport utility.
Motorweek is made possible by TireRack.com, Rain-X, Hum by Verizon, State Farm, and WeatherTech.
Sport utility vehicles may be the hottest selling machines in today's market, but a lot of them are hardly what you call exciting. The basic look of sport utes has hardly changed since the first Jeep Wagoneer rolled off the production line back in 1962. But the times, they are finally a-changing. Recent arrivals like the Mercedes-Benz ML Series and the Lexus RX 300 are moving away from the boxy SUV styling. And Isuzu is unleashing a radical sport ute called the VehiCROSS, and it's unlike any production sport ute before it.
That Trooper is good looking right there. The Trooper was kind of dorky, you know, and just a little too squared, and it always felt just a little too narrow and a little too tall. You know, certainly if you were looking at something like a Grand Cherokee, the Trooper was kind of dorky. Now, I've talked about the Trooper before on the channel, and let's see, my best friend's uncle, I think it was, had one, and we took it off into the Pine Barrens, and it was unbelievably good off-road. But still, Grand Cherokee was better. This one, I like this. I think this looks absolutely fantastic, and I love the two-tone. But we're not here for the Trooper.
In fact, the Isuzu VehiCROSS is helping change not only the look of sport utility vehicles, but also the way that they're made. Its zinc-coated steel body panels are made by a new ceramic die process that is faster, more flexible, and less expensive than traditional body stamping technology. But since ceramic dies wear out much more quickly, only limited numbers of the VehiCROSS will be built. U.S. customers will initially get a mere 200 vehicles per month. That select group will revel in the unique lines of the VehiCROSS's cyberpunk body style, which is protected down below by chunky lower body cladding molded from unfinished black polypropylene and even attached with industrial-looking Torex screws. Other notable fashionably rugged styling cues include the reptilian-looking nose with its snake-eye headlights and aggressive fanged grille, flat black hood insert to cut down glare, corrugated groove stamped into the doors, aircraft-style fuel filler cap, and enclosed full-size spare that looks great but severely restricts rearward visibility. Based on the two-door Trooper chassis, the VehiCROSS rides on a 91.8-inch wheelbase and sits 8.4 inches above the ground.
Okay, before they move on here to what looks like some of their engineering, I'm glad they mentioned it. It is based on the Trooper, which is why I talked about the Trooper at the beginning here. A eminently capable off-roader. So this is not a soft roader. This is not a CRV RAV4 competitor. It's more serious than that. And I have two minds about this vehicle. On the one hand, it looks cool, and at least Isuzu was doing something. They had a tendency, my opinion of Isuzu was they had a tendency to make things so boring as to be forgettable, right? Like early Troopers. Or to make things that just were a little too far out there. I think of the Stylus, for example. It didn't quite fit in the mainstream. but at the same time being just less refined than anything else out there as well. And this is a big swing for them. So it certainly falls on the weird looking side. And I want to say I don't like anything about it. I think that it's just so far off the ground. It looks disproportionate. It looks high off the ground, but squished at the top at the same time. The headlights, the snake eye headlights, are not proportional to the front. The black cladding comes up way too high. The matte black in the middle of the hood to reduce glare, that's a really smart idea. But then down the side, you get this black cladding, and then they put those ridges in the door. I mean, just, Pontiac had to have looked at this and been like, wow, we should do that too. And the rear looks, for all the world to me, like a RAV4. And it doesn't work. Like, this had to be aimed for young people. But it also wasn't as appealing as, say, the Amigo, with that little bit of convertibleness back there. So this isn't going to fit with families. So it has to be young people, but it doesn't exactly give off active lifestyle vibes, right? All of that being said, Isuzu managed to create a memorable looking car. Not beautiful, not upscale, but memorable, because I want to thank the viewer who recommended doing the VehiCROSS, because as soon as they said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember that. Because all of the individual pieces coalesce into, you don't forget it.
Between chassis and pavement, the VehiCROSS is supported by a double wishbone torsion bar suspension up front and a 4-link coil spring design in the rear. Both use new aluminum-bodied shock absorbers with separate expansion chambers to handle heat better. Long common on motorcycles, is the first use of this design in a 4-wheel production vehicle. 16-inch alloy wheels wearing chunky all-weather tires complete the package. And to move all this down the road, Isuzu has installed the latest version of the V6 engine used in the Trooper. It now displaces 3.5 liters and makes 215 horsepower as well as 230 pound-feet of torque, which reaches the wheels by way of a standard 4-speed automatic transmission. Hardcore off-roaders take note, no manual is available. The final and most important component in the drivetrain is Isuzu's Torque on Demand full-time all-wheel drive system. TOD uses a dozen sensors and sophisticated computer software to not only adjust to changing driving conditions, but even anticipate those changes ahead of time. Out on the road, that means that the VehiCROSS delivers a rather sporty driving experience with less of the truck feel common to the SUV class. In fact, it approaches the feel of a sporty car with its tight, precise steering and minimal body roll. Engine performance is also very car-like. Acceleration is brisk with excellent throttle response. Hardly the punch of V8-powered rivals, but more than adequate for daily on-road driving.
I'll tell you what, watching that car drive and move and, through curves and everything else, you know what it reminds me of? The Cherokee. Not the 80s, 90s Cherokee, but the reborn Cherokee after the Liberty. If you took those headlights and squinted them down, there's a familial resemblance there. Maybe cousins, not brother. But I think this is exhibiting some of the same strengths and weaknesses as that last Cherokee. Onto the mechanicals. I don't have a problem with the engine. Again, I'm sure some of you who are more versed in Isuzus will correct me, but I have a general overall positive opinion of that engine and its reliability. Same thing with their off-road ability, with the mechanicalness of the car. Very interesting, they say that it handles more like a sporty car, because I don't have that impression of the Trooper platform. It always felt very tall, and I guess without having a direct comparison from them, it looks like the VehiCROSS has its roof chopped down, maybe that improves the handling enough. But to me, the Trooper always felt a little top heavy. Interesting where they're going with this.
Off-road daily driving is also no chore, especially when it's on the big island of Hawaii. With some of the most changeable landscapes and weather conditions on the planet, Hawaii proved a perfect paradise to test an SUV that some wags think looks like it came from outer space. In truth, the lava, rock, and dirt roads we encountered on our controlled journey were easily conquered by the VehiCROSS and its nearly invisible TOD system. The really tough stuff was off limits, but we still put this way out Isuzu through a lot more trials than most buyers will encounter. Of course, while the outside of an SUV is a big part of buyer appeal, inside is where they'll spend all the drive time.
Isn't this sounding just a little bit more like an infomercial to you? I mean, how many times do there aren't a lot of these Motorweek reviews where they go into the suspension, where they talk about the transfer case, where they talk about the shock absorbers. This feels sponsored, if I'm being honest. Not bad, but sponsored.
And the inside of the VehiCROSS is frankly a disappointment. Rather than build an interior as radical as the exterior, Isuzu simply transplanted the Trooper's conventional dash. Though both dash and doors do get a bit of faux carbon trim, the seats, however, are leather-covered Recaro buckets that not only look good but offer plenty of support, and they face a set of jazzed-up analog gauges. A standard AM/FM cassette stereo at the top of the center dash is mated to a standard 6-disc CD changer at the bottom, as well as foolproof heat and ventilation controls and a full load of power accessories. Rear seat room is reasonable for adult-sized passengers, and the 50-50 split folding seat expands the standard 13.9 cubic feet of cargo space, which can be accessed only by using the key, since the unusual spare tire storage leaves no room in the door for a remote release mechanism. Though to be fair, the rear door release and dash styling are the only real compromises in what is clearly the most innovative sport ute ever to reach the showroom floor.
Interior. You know, I get their point. I don't dislike it. I think that is not upscale. It doesn't look rich and luxurious. You know, it doesn't look like a Grand Cherokee. Okay, it doesn't look as nice as the Mercedes that they mentioned before, but it looks functional, high quality plastics, and ergonomically it looks fine. I do prefer turning my HVAC rather than sliding it, so that actually feels a little bit, honestly, a little bit retro to me. But there's no problem there. But I do see their point that you've made this car that looks like a moon buggy, and then you put a very standard dash in it. And again, it goes back to that, what I said earlier, that Isuzu, you know, it's either out there or it's a little boring, and they did that in the same car here. But I don't think that was a bad choice. I mean, having a vehicle that is meant for an extrovert, look at me and look at my car, to get in and then just have a dash that works can't be a bad decision. You start changing the dash, which is not an inexpensive thing to do, and you end up with a bunch of different changes, and you know what we see now with lights under the dash and all this other crap, and it could turn people off for being just that one step too far. I'm liking this vehicle the more I hear.
And if you want to drive it away from there, expect to pay $28,900. The only options are a roof rack and special graphics to commemorate the annual Ironman fitness contest, which Isuzu supports. It's a price that many will gladly pay for such a unique machine, a machine that Automobile Magazine described as bold and funky and called it the first SUV with a sport wagon attitude. And attitude is what the Isuzu VehiCROSS is all about. An attitude that the old way of building sport utility vehicles is simply no longer good enough. And that in the future, it may well be sport utes like the VehiCROSS that truly represent the leading edge of automotive design.
That did not age well. in a world of sport utilities, no, nothing went like this. Everything became boring, rounded, very, very similar to each other. You get a few out there that try to stand out a little bit. I'll go back and mention the Cherokee again. But for the most part, you know, egg blobs is what we ended up with. So this ended up being a minor footnote, and they could only bring 200 a month, a minor footnote in the world of SUVs. And think about that. If they sold every one of them for 200 a month, that's only 2,400 a year. It's hard to believe it justified the engineering and gearing up for production for 2,400 a year. It just, there's a lot about this I question. Here's the fact. After watching that, I have a little bit more positive opinion on it. If I was in my 20s and I had $28,000 to go spend on something like this, and I wanted people to look at my vehicle, this vehicle screams LA or Miami to me, if I'm being honest here. I think it'd be perfectly fine. But for me, even back then in my 20s, it only has 2 doors. It's got more off-road chops, but I don't know. It's not urban professional. It's not for older people. It's not for families. It's a little too extroverted for most people, maybe with some off-roading that people don't really need most of the time, which is why like the CR-V and the RAV4 became more popular. I don't see the specific demographic that would want this. There's a small number of people who would be excited by this and its capability, and it's built on standard Isuzu platform and mechanicals. But from Isuzu's point of view, this isn't a halo car. You know, you're making 200 or you're selling 200 a month. It feels like a waste of money. But at least they were trying to make a statement. They were trying to say, look at something interesting over here. Interesting car. Hey, if you had one, I would love to hear from you. How did it hold up? What did you think about it? Did it get old, honestly? Was something that looked exciting and futuristic and like it should be on Mars, suddenly you just get tired of it? I don't know. I'm ambivalent about this car, but it is, I want to be fair here, for all of that criticism around the styling and just its position and everything else, it is a very memorable car because once you see it, nothing else really has ever looked the same. You know, they didn't set a new trend, and so this kind of sits out there as what we all kind of like. A weird, quirky, and largely forgotten vehicle, which is exactly the kind of thing I like to do videos about. Thanks for being here, y'all. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me.